Could you forgive someone who destroyed your life just because you loved them too much? He was called a murderer, sentenced to the electric chair, all for trying to save the woman he loved most. Years later, the tape with his final words was found, and the world finally learned the truth, but it was already too late. Comment below, would you tell the truth, even if no one would believe you?
My name is Henry Whitaker. I was born in Savannah, Georgia in the year 1918. In just a few hours, they'll take me to the electric chair. It's strange to think that after all these years, the end comes so quietly. The clock outside keeps ticking as if nothing is happening, but here every second feels like a stone pressing down on my chest. It's been 34 years since the day they said I killed my wife, Eleanor. And ever since that day, my life has been stuck in that moment. I still remember the smell of her coffee every morning, the sound of the radio playing softly in the kitchen, and her smile when I came home from the workshop. Sometimes I close my eyes and almost believe I can still hear her calling my name. They say a man must accept his fate, but what happens when fate is written by the wrong hands? I've spent over 3 decades waiting for a miracle that never came. I haven't had visitors in years. My brothers are gone. My nephews grew up believing I was a murderer. And you know, I don't even blame them. The whole world believed it. The whole town did. Because it's easier to point at someone than to listen to the truth. Now, all I have left is this camera, this tape spinning, and the hope that someone somewhere will listen to what I have to say. I don't want pity. I don't want forgiveness. I just want the truth to survive. They said I killed the woman I loved most, but no one saw what really happened that night. No one, except God. Do you know what's worse than dying? It's dying without the world ever knowing who you truly were. I've spent half my life trying to understand how everything went so wrong, how a love so pure could turn into a story of hate. I'm not afraid of dying. I died a long time ago when they took away my right to be heard. I've accepted this moment. I know there's no turning back. But if this tape survives, if someone ever hears my voice, I want them to know that love is not what kills. Love is what remains when everything else is gone. This ring I keep in my pocket, it was hers. They let me keep it because they knew I wouldn't walk out of here alive. I hold it every day, as if I could still feel the warmth of her hands. That's what kept me alive all these years, this small piece of gold, and the memory of who she really was. They say every man gets a last meal, but what I want is a last chance to be heard. That's why I'm here, facing this camera, telling what really happened. Maybe no one will believe me. Maybe they'll laugh. But if someone listens to the end, maybe they'll see that not every condemned man is a killer. Love brought me here. The same love they tried to erase with lies, with fire, and with fear. But love doesn't fade. It stays. It survives even inside the cold walls of a prison. And it's for that love that I'm speaking now. To tell the truth. The truth they tried to bury with me. Today is my last day. I don't know what time it is outside, but in here time doesn't move. It just watches me, waiting for me to give up first. The ticking of a clock down the hall is the only thing that reminds me the world is still turning. Sometimes I imagine the sky, the wind through the trees, the smell of freshly cut wood. It's been so long since I've seen the sun that I'm not even sure it would recognize me anymore. I thought that when this day came, I'd be desperate, begging, screaming for one more chance. But I'm not. There's a strange peace here. It's as if, after fighting fate for so long, I finally understood that the end isn't punishment. It's just the silence that follows a life that screamed too loud. They let me write a letter this morning. I don't know who will read it. Maybe no one. Maybe God. I asked him if he's still listening to let me leave this world clean. Not in body, but in soul. I want to go without the weight of the lie they buried me under. I want to leave as the man I was before all of this. I spent hours staring at the ceiling of this cell. The cracks look like old maps, roads that lead nowhere. Life is a lot like that. We follow paths thinking we're going home, but somehow end up lost in places we never chose. A guard named Miller brought me coffee earlier. He's young. His hands trembled when he set the cup down. I could tell he was avoiding my eyes. It's hard to look at a man you know is about to die. I thanked him and asked what time it was. He whispered, "Not long now, Mr. Whitaker." I smiled. He didn't understand why. But it was the smile of someone who finally made peace with time. Not as an enemy, but as a messenger. Over the years, I've learned to live with the sound of metal doors closing, the echo of footsteps, the prayers, the curses. Some men beg for mercy, others curse God. I just listen, and I've realized silence is the loudest sound in this place. The pastor came by a few hours ago. He read a passage from the Bible, told me repentance is the bridge between man and salvation. I stayed quiet, because how can I repent for something I didn't do? Deep down he knows, but maybe his silence is mercy. Maybe that's how he lets me leave in peace. I still think of Eleanor. I imagine her smile. I think she would have forgiven me. She was made of kindness. Even when life was cruel, she still believed in people. I remember her voice saying, "One day, Henry, the world will understand you." Maybe that day never came for her, but maybe it will for me, even if it's after I'm gone. My body's tired, but my mind is sharp. I remember everything. Every face in that courtroom, every whisper, every headline calling me the monster of Montgomery. No one wanted to know the truth. But that's fine. The truth has its own timing. And if it didn't come in life, maybe it will come after death. I look into this camera, and I know it's my last witness, the only one that won't lie about what happens here. The tape will spin until the end, and when it stops, I hope someone listens, because the thing that destroyed my life wasn't the crime. It was the silence. Now, just hours before I die, there's no anger, no fear. Only a truth kept hidden for too long, finally ready to be freed. That's what I'm going to do. I won't leave this world without telling it. I want the world to know that Henry Whitaker died innocent, that he loved until his last breath, that he remained loyal to the truth, even when it cost him his life. I'm no saint. I've made mistakes like any man, but this, the one they killed me for, wasn't one of them. And if death is the price to make someone listen, then so be it. Because the truth is worth more than life itself. When I was a boy, life had already begun teaching me about the weight of things. I was born in Savannah, Georgia, in a small wooden house that smelled of sawdust and smoke. My father was a carpenter, just like I would become one day. We didn't have much, but the sound of his tools made me believe the world could be fixed, piece by piece, the same way he fixed broken furniture. He used to say, "Son, good wood can burn, but it never stops being wood." I didn't understand what he meant until much later, when my own life went up in flames and I had to keep being who I was anyway. The Great Depression hit when I was just a child. I remember my mother trading bread for firewood, her face changing whenever she thought I wasn't looking. That's when I learned the silence of hunger. The streets of Savannah were cruel, and the only ones who survived were those who learned to hear the noise of misery without giving up. I started working early, sanding boards, helping my father assemble old chairs and tables people left outside to be thrown away. He said nothing that carried a story deserved to be burned. Maybe that's why I learned to love old things, things that carry marks, cracks, and memories. My childhood was simple, but it was real. It smelled like varnish and rain, sounded like hammers and blues on the radio. At night, when the heat suffocated the house, I'd sit on the porch with my father and he'd talk about dignity. "A man can lose everything, Henry," he'd say, "but never his word." I kept that like a commandment, and now at the end of my life I realize that it's exactly my word, my truth, that they tried to take from me. I grew up surrounded by the sound of trains. My father's workshop was near the railway, and I'd watch the locomotives pass like iron beasts carrying people to places I could only imagine. Every time the whistle blew, I felt an urge to follow them, to see what was beyond the tracks. But destiny had other plans. As time passed, life pushed me toward work, sweat, and the same ground where my father grew old. I didn't mind. I loved the sound of the saw cutting wood, the smell of glue heating, the rough touch of sandpaper. It was the kind of silence that made sense, a silence that built instead of destroyed. When I turned 18, my father fell ill. I took over the shop, and that's when I learned the value of simple things. I was never a man of luxury. All I wanted was a home, a dinner table, a woman to love, and a corner of the world to call mine. Back then, life still felt fair. Honest work still meant something. Sometimes I wonder if I had left Savannah earlier, maybe things would have been different. But how can you leave the place that made you who you are? So I stayed. The years passed. The war came, took friends, neighbors, and brought back only silence. I didn't go. I stayed fixing broken windows and doors for men who returned different, carrying ghosts instead of medals. That's when I began to understand that the world would never be the same again. My father died in 1943. The last thing he said to me was, "Son, the truth is the only nail time can't pull out." I never forgot that. Even now, facing death, those words hold me together. That's why I'm recording this. Because if I go, at least the truth will stay. Childhood was the time when the world still made sense. Before love became pain, before justice turned into punishment, before the name Henry Whitaker became a curse. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear my mother calling from the kitchen, my father hammering in the shop, the train passing in the distance. And for a moment, just a brief, fragile moment, everything is the way it used to be. A boy dreaming of fixing the world, not knowing that one day it would be the world that broke him instead. After my father died, life grew quieter. I kept the workshop running, restoring old furniture for families around Montgomery. That's when I met Eleanor. She was a school teacher, the daughter of a farmer who had lost nearly everything after the war. She had a smile that seemed to challenge the world's exhaustion and a voice that sounded like rest. I met her while fixing chairs at the school where she worked. I still remember her reading a story to the children, her voice soft, full of life. The children looked at her as if they were listening to an angel. I did too. It didn't take long to see that there was something different about her. She found beauty in things most people gave up on. An old piece of furniture, a sad child, a lonely man. And I was all three. She used to say that life was like wood. The more it's scarred, the stronger it becomes. And I, a man who spent his life fixing what others broke, finally felt someone was fixing me. We married in 1947 on a bright Saturday afternoon. The ceremony was small, in a Baptist church in downtown Montgomery. She wore a light blue dress and held flowers from her own garden. I'd never seen anything so beautiful. That day, for the first time, life felt light, as if the world had stopped hurting just to let us breathe. Our first years together were simple but full. Our house was small, made of pale wood with wide windows. I worked in the shop. She taught children. At night, we'd listen to the radio together. She loved to dance while dinner was cooking, and I used to joke that the floor would collapse under her joy. She'd laugh and say, "If it does, we'll rebuild it." And that's what she did with me. She rebuilt what life had broken. When we lost our first child in 1951, the world fell silent. She cried without sound, and I tried to be strong for both of us. The house went cold for months. That's when I learned that grief is a guest that never knocks and never leaves easily. Eleanor withdrew into herself, and I tried to fill the emptiness with work, flowers, and hope. But nothing healed the absence. Still, even in sadness, she remained gentle. She'd say, "One day, Henry, it'll all make sense." I didn't know that one day would never come. In the summer of 1953, things started to look brighter again. I had landed a contract restoring furniture for a downtown hotel. Eleanor began smiling again, painting the house, caring for her garden. We'd sit on the porch at night and she'd rest her head on my shoulder, saying she could hear the train far away. She said the sound reminded her of a heartbeat. I told her it was the sound of life passing by. She smiled and said, "Then let it pass slowly." But Montgomery was changing. The city looked peaceful on the surface, but underneath it was full of tension and secrets. Segregation still poisoned the streets and fear ruled quietly. Eleanor, brave as always, joined community groups helping poor families. She said some policemen were stealing the donation money. One of them, Harold Briggs, had a name that people whispered about. I told her to be careful. She told me fear was what let evil men win. We still had our routines: morning coffee, work, laughter, books. She'd write me letters even while living in the same house. I still keep one of them folded in my pocket. "You're the only good thing left in this world, Henry." Back then, I thought love could protect us from anything. I thought loving enough was enough. But love sometimes is a flame. It warms while it burns, but when the wind shifts, it destroys everything around it. I just didn't know the wind was about to change forever. Sometimes I think of that summer as the last happy chapter of my life. The nights were long, the dreams still possible, and hope still had a place to rest. Eleanor slept beside me, and the sound of her breathing was the sound of peace itself. If I had known what was coming, I would have held her tighter. I would have told her 1,000 more times that I loved her. But life Life always makes sure we understand the important things when it's already too late. The day my life changed started like any other. It was February 1954. The sun rose slow over Montgomery, and I could still hear the sound of trains in the distance. I spent the morning at the workshop restoring an old dresser. Around 5, I washed my hands, locked the door, and walked home thinking about dinner. Eleanor had promised to make apple pie, the kind she made when she wanted the world to feel less cruel. When I turned the corner, I smelled smoke. At first I thought someone was burning leaves, but as I got closer I realized the smoke was coming from our house. My heart stopped. I dropped my tools and ran. The gate was open, the door half shut. I called her name, but only the crackle of burning wood answered. The fire came from the kitchen, spreading fast through the curtains. I rushed in, trying to put it out with my jacket. That's when I saw her. Eleanor was on the floor, her face pale, covered in soot. A small pool of blood by her hand. I knelt down, lifted her into my arms. She was still breathing, faintly. I tried to pull her outside, but before I could, neighbors came running. And that's when everything turned against me. By the time the firefighters arrived, half the house was gone. The neighbors saw me holding her body, my hands covered in blood and ash. A kitchen knife lay near the table, the same one we used for fruit. Later, they said there were traces of kerosene on the floor, and the report concluded it was arson. The police showed up, and before I could explain anything, I was already surrounded like a guilty man. I remember the shouting, the questions, the lights. I told them I found my wife already hurt, that I tried to save her. No one believed me. The sheriff looked at me and said, "The fire didn't start itself, Mr. Whitaker." When they found a can of kerosene in the shed, that was it. Case closed. The next hours are a blur. They took me to the station, still covered in soot, coughing from the smoke, trying to understand what had just happened. In the hallway, I saw them covering her body with a white sheet. That was the moment everything died. I shouted, begged them to listen, to let me explain. They only tightened the handcuffs. Days later, they handed me the report. I'll never forget what it said. Homicide and arson. Primary suspect, Henry Whitaker, husband. The world I knew ended right there. The same neighbors who once waved at me now crossed the street. The church where we married closed its doors to me. The town that once called me hardworking now called me a murderer. Then came the worst part. They found a letter. Eleanor's handwriting. Weeks old. It said, "If anything happens to me, look to Henry." They said that proved she feared me. I tried to explain. She had been depressed since we lost the baby. She wrote letters when she couldn't speak. But no one listened. That letter became my verdict before the trial even began. Back then, people didn't talk about grief or depression, and I, not knowing how to explain her pain, became the perfect villain. The press plastered my face all over Alabama. Husband kills wife. Burns evidence. I read that headline and felt my soul collapse. When they put me in the police truck, I could still smell her on my hands. Smoke, wood, and sorrow. I knew then that nothing I said would change what they had already decided. The truth had no voice anymore. And sitting in that dark van, I understood something I'd never forget. Hell isn't a place. Hell is being innocent and not being believed. Prison began long before the bars. It started in the eyes of people. I still remember the walk to the station, faces frozen in windows, whispers, my name spoken like a curse. That day, Montgomery felt like a city made of eyes, all watching, all judging. I was taken away in handcuffs, shirtless, covered in soot, a man the newspapers had already turned into a monster. The cell smelled like rust and fear. A tired old cop handed me a cup of water and said, "It'll be quick, Whitaker. You know what you did." I replied, "No, sir. I just know what I lost." He laughed and walked away. The trial came fast. It had to. The town needed a killer, and I fit the part perfectly. The courtroom was packed. I remember the sweat, the smell of old wood, the noise of reporters pushing for a better picture. The judge, the prosecutor, the jury, they all looked like they already knew the ending. My lawyer was young, nervous, a man assigned by the state. "Henry, we need evidence," he whispered. "Evidence of what?" I asked. "No one's listening." He lowered his head. The prosecutor was the opposite, confident, loud, cruel. He waved photos of the burnt house, the knife, the letter. He said, "husband," as if it meant killer. "This man murdered his wife and tried to burn the proof," he shouted, pointing at me. Every word was a nail in my coffin. When it was my turn to speak, the room went silent. I told them exactly what happened, that I found the fire, that I tried to save her, that I loved her. I looked at their faces, searching for doubt. I found none. The prosecutor cut me off. "You expect us to believe a woman would write a letter accusing her husband for no reason?" he said. I answered, "She was ill, sir. Not in body, in spirit." The courtroom laughed. The next day, the verdict. Rain outside. The judge's voice flat, cold, guilty. The word echoed again and again, until it became the only sound in my head. Sentenced to death by electric chair. Some people applauded, others just left. My lawyer whispered, "We'll appeal." I didn't answer. I knew we wouldn't. Men like me didn't get second chances. A few days later, they moved me to Montgomery State Prison. The iron gate slammed shut behind me, and a guard said, "Welcome to death row." I looked straight ahead and said, "Been here for years." Inside, I became a ghost. The wife killer, they called me. Burned her alive. I tried to speak, but truth doesn't live long in places like this. It dies in the noise before it's even heard. Nights were the hardest. The fire never stopped burning in my mind. Her face, her voice, the smoke. Every time I closed my eyes, it came back. The screams, the smell, the helplessness. A priest visited one Sunday. He asked if I believed in forgiveness. "I do," I said, "but forgiveness is for those who did wrong." I didn't. He left without another word. That cell became my entire world. 4 walls, 1 bed, footsteps echoing down the corridor. Sometimes silence would break when another man was taken away. I learned the rhythm of prison. Bitter coffee, cold water, endless waiting. But the worst part wasn't the cell. It was knowing that outside, the name Henry Whitaker meant murderer. My life had been rewritten by strangers. And when the appeal was denied, I understood something I'll never forget. The trial didn't end in the courtroom. It followed me every day, in every whisper, every stare, every heartbeat that reminded me I was still alive in a world that had already buried me. The years on death row aren't lived. They're endured. Time doesn't move here. It presses down on you. Morning and evening look the same, and the only thing that changes is the color of the light through the bars. At first I counted the days, scratching lines into the wall. Then I stopped. There's no reason to count time when it no longer belongs to you. The first years were the hardest. Montgomery State Prison was an open wound, blistering heat in summer, bone-cutting cold in winter. The screams never stopped. Sometimes they came from far away, sometimes from the cell next door. It was a place where hope rotted slowly. I learned fast that silence was more dangerous than noise. I was attacked 3 times. The first was by a man named Reggie, who said God sent him to punish wife killers. He tried to strangle me with a sheet. A guard saved me at the last second. The second time was uglier, a blade hidden inside a piece of bread. I bled for days, feverish and alone. The third time, 2 men cornered me in the yard. One said, "If the state don't kill you, we will." I looked at them and said, "Then look close, boys. You're staring at an innocent man." After that, they called me the old man who won't die. I think they realized death didn't want me yet. Guards came and went, prisoners too. But the sound of the electric chair never changed. Every time the generator started, the whole block went silent. The air turned heavy, and we all knew someone was leaving this world. I never slept on those nights. Every crackle of the current sounded like a reminder of what was waiting for me. I learned the rhythm of hell. Bitter coffee, cold showers, endless hours. Many men went mad. Some hanged themselves. Others just stopped speaking until they faded away. I survived, not because I was strong, but because I had something left to say. In the 1970s, a young reporter started visiting, Samuel Hayes, too idealistic for his own good. He listened to my story and said he believed me. I laughed. It had been decades since I'd heard those words. He promised to find the old files, the missing evidence. For years he visited, recorded our talks, took pictures. Sometimes he brought newspapers, told me what was happening in the world. I listened like someone hearing a forgotten language. But time eats the mind. I saw men lose themselves, talking to walls, crying at night. I started to forget Eleanor's face. I remembered her voice, her scent. But her face, it began to fade. And that was the cruelest pain of all. To lose the memory of the one you loved is to die in pieces. One day an old guard asked, "Why do you still believe someone will listen to you, Whitaker?" I said, "Because the truth is stubborn. It can sleep, but it never dies." He laughed, called me a crazy old man. But I knew I was right. Years passed. New faces, new executions. I grew old, my hands shaking, my hair white. Time took everything from me, except my will to speak. In 1985, Samuel returned. He was older too, worn out, but determined. He said he'd found something. Altered reports, a name, Harold Briggs. The same cop Eleanor had feared. Briggs had been taking bribes, and the night of the fire, he'd been covering up a scandal. When Samuel said his name, something inside me woke up. It was the first real spark of hope I'd felt in 30 years. He said he'd try to reopen the case, but it wouldn't be easy. "They don't want old ghosts, Henry," he said, "but I'll try." After that, I started writing everything. Names, dates, places. Samuel brought me tapes, and I began to record my story piece by piece. That's how this began. He told me, "One day someone will hear this." And I believed him. Even now, fear visits me sometimes. I wake up to the sound of fire, the smell of smoke, the echo of her voice. But I don't run anymore. I don't cry out. I've learned there are pains you don't escape. You tell them. And that's why I'm still speaking, because as long as I speak, I'm still here. As long as my voice carries the truth, the world hasn't erased me completely. The quietest pain is the one that comes from distance, the kind that doesn't scream or bleed, but eats at you a little every day. When I was first arrested, my family still wrote to me. At the beginning, the letters were full of hope. My mother, already old, said she believed in me, that God wouldn't let an innocent man die. My brother Thomas promised to sell whatever he had to hire a better lawyer. For a few months, hope still had a face, still had a voice. But time, that cruel thief, took it all away. After a year, the letters came less often. After 2, they stopped. Then came the message from the town priest, a short note saying my mother had passed peacefully. But I know better. No mother dies in peace knowing her son will die too. And for something he didn't do. They didn't let me attend her funeral. "Convicts don't go to funerals," they said. That was the day I stopped being a man. I became a number. Thomas tried to hold on for a while. He wrote, promised visits, talked about hope. But eventually he went silent too. Maybe from shame, maybe fear. Montgomery is a small town, and carrying the name Whitaker became too heavy. A guard once told me Thomas had moved to Atlanta, opened a shop, and never spoke of me again. And I understood. Shame is a kind of prison too, one that people choose for themselves. My nephews grew up hearing that Uncle Henry was a murderer. I imagine what they thought when they saw my face in the newspaper, that old black and white photo with my name under it. The man who killed his wife. It's a strange thing watching the world tell your story for you, while you can't say a word to correct it. It's like screaming underwater. Sometimes I dreamed of them. I'd see us all around the dinner table, Eleanor smiling, my mother serving food, Thomas laughing. And then, like every dream, it would end the same way. They'd all stand up and leave, and I'd wake up alone to the sound of the cell door slamming. In the early years, I still wrote letters even when no one answered. I'd write about the prison, the pastor, the men who came and went. I knew no one would read them, but writing reminded me I was still human. Then I stopped. The silence that follows an unanswered letter hurts more than any prison wall. Once in 1972, I received an unexpected letter. It was from a niece I'd never met. She must have been in her 20s. She said she grew up believing I was guilty, but after reading old reports, she began to doubt. She wrote that she believed in me, that she thought Eleanor had tried to protect someone, and I was the scapegoat. I read that letter so many times the paper nearly fell apart. It was the only time in all these years someone said they believed me. I kept that letter. It's still with me, along with Eleanor's ring. The only proof I have left that once I was loved, that once I had a family. But pain doesn't just come from absence. It comes from memory. When I remember my mother's voice, Thomas's laughter, the smell of Sunday dinner, I feel something tear inside, like homesickness with claws. Sometimes memories hurt more than wounds. Loneliness is strange. At first it scares you, then it becomes a routine. And when it becomes routine, it eats you alive. When younger inmates complain that no one visits, I'd tell them, one day you'll stop waiting. They think I'm cold. I'm not. I've just learned that hope can kill too, slowly, with the rhythm of days that never change. In the end, the only family left is the one that lives in memory. The voices in your head, the faces fading with time. I still talk to them. My mother, Thomas, Eleanor. I tell them I'm sorry for not being strong enough to prove the truth. And I always finish with the same words I never said when they were alive. I'm still here, and I'm still the man you raised. As the years went by, I learned that injustice isn't just a sentence. It's a prison inside the prison. It doesn't chain your hands. It chains your soul. You wake up every day knowing the world out there moves on, while your name stays dirty. And that hurts more than the walls ever could. The body gets used to the cell, but the mind never adjusts to the lie. The system that condemned me didn't want truth. It wanted closure, a name, a face. And I was there, the wrong man at the right time. Poor, ordinary, easy to forget. They didn't need evidence, they needed peace of mind. And I gave them that. For years I tried to understand how justice could be so blind. But I realized it was never blind. It just chooses what not to see. I watched prosecutors perform like actors and judges sign death like paperwork. To them, I wasn't a man. I was a case file. But truth, even buried deep, finds air. In the 1980s, Samuel Hayes, the stubborn reporter who refused to let go, began piecing things together. He found old files, missing reports, records that had vanished from the courthouse. He discovered that the lead investigator, Officer Harold Briggs, had been accused of corruption years before, but the case was buried. Samuel told me everything, face to face through the bars. He said Eleanor had found out about Briggs stealing money from charity funds, and before she died, she planned to expose him. She kept her notes in a small journal that vanished the night of the fire. I remember that journal. She kept it in her dresser drawer. The police tore the place apart, but it was never found. Briggs died in 1972. Heart attack. Funeral with honors. The papers called him a hero, and I stayed here paying for his sins. Samuel said there was still a chance that with those documents the case could be reopened, but time wasn't on my side. Every day I aged, every day the world forgot I existed. I think about how many times I've been called murderer. Guards, inmates, reporters, they all said the word like it was my name. But the truth didn't matter to them. The system doesn't need truth. It just needs to keep turning. There were nights I wanted to give up. Nights I thought about ending it all just to stop the noise in my head. But then I remembered Eleanor, her bravery, her stubborn heart. and I couldn't. Because if I died silent, the truth would die with me. I wonder how many lives have been destroyed in the name of justice. How many innocent men were buried because silence was easier. I've seen men here confess to crimes they didn't commit, not out of guilt, but exhaustion. That's when the system truly wins, when it makes the innocent crave death. Samuel used to say my story was a wound that never healed in the heart of Alabama, that someday someone would have to look at it again. I believed him, still do, because truth doesn't need to rush. It waits. Time always ends up working for it. Now at 71, with death closer than freedom ever was, I can feel the weight of injustice in every breath. It's not just the weight of the accusation, it's the weight of memory, pain, lost years, faded faith. I wonder how the world keeps turning after burying so much innocence. But I've learned something. Evil gets old too. And when it gets old, the mask falls off. The truth doesn't chasten, it endures. It waits. And when time finally bows to it, it wins. That's why I keep talking, even if no one listens, even if my voice echoes only in these walls. Because as long as I speak, truth still breathes. And as long as it breathes, injustice can never be complete. This is the last night of my life. And strangely, it feels just like all the others. The same footsteps down the corridor, the same distant voices, the same smell of metal and cheap soap. Only the silence has changed. It's heavier now, as if even the air knows it won't find me here tomorrow. The guards try not to look at me. It's part of the ritual. They pretend it's just another day, another name to be crossed off. But I can see the unease in their eyes. One of them, the youngest, Miller, his hands shake when he brings the coffee. He calls me sir, and that hurts more than any insult. Because even now, after all this time, someone still sees a man where the world saw a murderer. The chaplain came earlier, read from Psalm 23, talked about repentance. I listened quietly. When he finished, he asked if I wanted to confess. I said, I already did, Father. They just didn't believe me. He sighed, put his hand on my shoulder and whispered, God believes. I wish I did too. I asked for paper and a pen, wrote a short letter, maybe my last. I wrote to Samuel, told him he was the only one who ever listened, the only one who believed when everyone else turned away. I asked him not to let this recording disappear, to keep it as proof, not of innocence, but of humanity. Because that's what this place steals first, your humanity. When I finished writing, I heard the key turn. It was late. The guard opened the door slowly and handed me a yellowed envelope. Came for you, Mr. Whitaker, he said. The reporter sent it. My heart started racing. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a short letter and a piece of old folded paper. I knew the handwriting instantly. It was hers, Eleanor's. The letter read, Henry, I know you tried to save me. Forgive me for everything. Forgive me for doubting you. If someone finds this, they'll know you never hurt me. I loved you until the end. E. The ink was blurred, maybe from smoke, maybe from tears. I pressed the paper against my face and closed my eyes. It felt like time folded back. For a moment, I could almost smell her perfume again. That letter was all I had left of my life, and proof that I wasn't insane. I sat on the bed holding her ring in my hand, staring at the ceiling. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything that was taken. Injustice stole nearly everything, but not the love. And that's what I'm taking with me. Tomorrow at 5 in the morning, they'll come for me. I've seen it happen before. The footsteps, the murmurs, the silence that follows. It's strange knowing the exact time of your own death. Strange, but almost peaceful. There's nothing left to fear. I stared at this camera for hours, the same one recording me now. I thought about what I'd say, and realized maybe the truth was never meant to save me. Maybe it was meant to free the world from the lie. If anyone ever hears this tape, I want them to understand. This isn't a plea for mercy. It's a testimony. A man can lose everything, but not the truth. That, no one can take. I closed my eyes and prayed that Eleanor had forgiven me before she died. That wherever she was, she knew I never stopped loving her. The prison clock struck midnight. My heart beat slow, but calm. For the first time in decades, I felt no anger, no fear, just a quiet certainty. The end isn't the opposite of life. It's where truth and time finally meet. When the cell light flickered, I looked at the camera and smiled. A small, honest smile. The kind only an innocent man gives before he dies. If you're hearing this, I want you to know. Every word I'm saying comes from a man who's lost everything except the truth. I'm not speaking for forgiveness. I'm not speaking to convince anyone. I'm speaking because the truth deserves to be told, even when it comes too late. That night over 30 years ago, I didn't kill my wife. I tried to save her. When I came home and saw the fire, she was already down. The kerosene on the floor wasn't to burn anything. She'd been cleaning paint stains for a new project. She slipped, hit her head, and the fire started when a candle fell onto the cloth. It happened in seconds, but the world took decades to understand. That letter they found. If anything happens to me, look to Henry. It wasn't a warning. It was a cry for help. Eleanor had been threatened. She knew too much about that officer, Harold Briggs. She told me about the money, the names, the ledgers, the papers he kept hidden. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of him. The morning before the fire, she went to the police station. I learned that years later through Samuel's files. She handed over copies of the records she'd hidden. Briggs found out. Witnesses saw him near our house that evening, but no one said a word. Nobody wanted to go against a man who ran the city. Now I understand. Eleanor died because she tried to do what was right. And I died with her, only slower. Her body rested. Mine stayed behind, burning every day in the fire of injustice. I look into this camera and think of all the others out there, shouting in silence, waiting for someone to listen. Justice fails. And when it does, it doesn't fix. It buries. I don't know what will happen when this tape ends. Maybe it'll stay hidden. Maybe someone will find it long after I'm gone. But if you're listening, know this. No lie lives forever. Truth waits, and when it arrives, it changes everything, even what's already been destroyed. My name is Henry Whitaker, Born in Savannah, Georgia, in the summer of 1914. I was a carpenter, a husband, a brother, a son, and for 41 years, they called me a murderer. But I was never that. I was just a man who loved too deeply and paid the price for believing in justice. Before they take me, I want to say something. The fire that burned me wasn't in the house. It was in their hearts. The fire of hatred. And hatred, when fueled by lies, burns everything pure. Take a deep breath. Look into my eyes. And remember this. The truth may be slow, but it always arrives. And these were my last words.
Henry Whitaker was executed on the morning of April 12, 1986, at 5:17 a.m. in Montgomery State Prison, Alabama. He was 71 years old. For decades, the case was forgotten, until 1994, when the tapes containing his final confession were discovered by journalist Samuel Hayes in an abandoned news archive. What they revealed shocked the nation. Words that crossed time to remind the world that truth can be silenced, but never erased. If this story moved you, share it. Leave a comment below. Would you still speak if you knew no one would believe you until it was too late? And don't forget to subscribe, because every week we give voice to those the world chose to forget. These were the last words of Henry Whitaker. Months later, authorities reopened the investigation and finally proved what Henry had said all along. Officer Harold Briggs had falsified evidence, destroyed files, and planted proof to cover up his own crime. But Briggs was already dead, and once again, justice came too late. Henry Whitaker's name was cleared in 1996, 10 years after his execution, but no court can return the years he lost, the love he was denied, or the peace he never knew. What remains now are his words.